Connecting to cloud server.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for taking time today to join us. This time around, we will be covering the latest skill migration updates 2020-2021 for Australia and New Zealand. Find out what are the trends and direction, as well as expected changes in this program. Introducing our presenter for today, firstly, Desmond Ang, our very own founder and managing director of Global Migration Solution. He has been awarded the top 50 Global Migration Agency CEO and has 16 years of experience in migration industry. Desmond has a strong background in financial and was a certified chartered accountant with PwC before his migration career. Secondly, Audrey Anthony. She is our Associate Director of Global Migration Solution with over 10 years of experience handling skilled migration cases. Before we start, a quick reminder for all of us, there will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Feel free to drop your question in the chat box and we will try our best to respond them all if time permits. Otherwise, please provide your contact detail and our team will be in touch with you after the webinar. To book your free one-to-one consultation, please key in one-to-one OZ or one-to-one NZ in the chat box, and we will arrange a slot with Desmond or Audrey. Without further ado, Audrey will start off at New Australia skill migration, and Desmond will continue with New Zealand. Audrey, over to you.
Thank you, Hassam. Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome once again. It's really a pleasure to have all of you with us today this morning. Before I get into the process, I would just like to do a quick introduction to the company. All right, this is for the benefit of those who have not known us yet. So Global Migration Solutions, we've been around for 16 years and we carry ourselves as a premier migration advisory firm advocating the right migration practices. Over this past 16 years, we have helped more than 12,000 families with their migration dreams, and we have a 99% success rate. We have also grown to 5 offices now. We are now based in KL, Singapore, Vietnam, Hong Kong, and we also have a service office in Australia. We are also very happy to share with you that we are the only migration agency in Malaysia that has been awarded the top 50 Global Migration Agency CEO by UGlobal in Los Angeles. These are the programs that we carry. We've been the pioneer in Australia and New Zealand migration since 2004. And over the years, we have further developed our services into other migration as well, such as Portugal, US, and Malaysia. All right, so the most interesting part for today. The focus for today would be what is the outlook of the latest skill migration program budget for 2020-2021, which was just released on October 6th. And after that, I'll be just going through the skill migration pathway as well. And many are also asking about the student visa pathway to Australia, so we will also touch on that today. So the good news is the migration planning level remains at 160,000 places for this year, which is actually same as 2019. But let's look at the focus. What is the overall focus of the entire migration program given the current pandemic? So the direction is this. With this pandemic, Australia's latest budget is actually mainly focused to carefully manage a migration program that will play an important part of Australia's economic recovery post-COVID, yeah? And that will create jobs and bring high value investment into Australia to rebound from this COVID-19 situation. That will be the main focus until July 2021. So let's look at the distribution of the quotas of the 160,000. This is a comparison between 2019 and 2020 as well. We can see that the skill migration trends are actually have gone down. But this is from October 2020 to June 2021. So let's see where's the focus, where the quotas going up. The quota has actually been doubled for business and investment program because this is actually in line with the direction of bringing in high value investment and creating job opportunities. As far as the skill stream is concerned, there's a lot of focus on global talent as well. I'll be walking you through about the global talent visa to see, because this is an interesting part where immigration has tripled the quota that is given. As far as the family stream is concerned, you can see that the partner visas have been also almost doubled. So in summary, in terms of the distribution of the planning levels, Australia will be prioritizing the global talent visa and the business innovation and investment program for 2020 to 2021. While on average, you actually see that the general skill migration numbers have dropped more than 50%, but do take note that these allocations are only going to be running from October to June. Okay, the financial year always ends in end of June. So these are the programs that we have. These are the quotas that we have till then. The priority for the skill stream for this year will be for onshore applicants, especially with the priority given to those who are residing in the regional areas. Having said that, there has been no ruling out that has been done that offshore applicants will not be given any quotas this year or anything of that sort. Okay, all this would be depending on the state migration programs. So as you know, when it comes to skill migration, there's a lot of dependency on how each state runs their program. Till today, the new program for each state has not been released yet. It is expected that the earliest state to release this would be South Australia, which is going to be in November. Queensland is actually scheduled for December. So each states will actually be given their own rights to say, how they wish to run their program and how they wish to allocate their quotas. So there is no ruling out that offshore will not be given any priority, okay? But we just need to depend on how the state runs their program. So what is PMSOL? Based on the quotas that are given this year, the focus of the quotas will be given to occupations that are listed on PMSOL. PMSOL stands for Priority Migration Skill Occupation List. There are 17 occupations here. Out of the 17 occupations, 11 of them are mostly related to medical, right? But if you're looking at a common occupations that are usually among our Malaysian clients, especially, that should be given great importance is, for example, construction project manager, mechanical engineer, software engineer, developer programmers. So take note, these 4 occupations are still going to be on the priority list, and those who are especially on this list should definitely not delay the process of migration. Let me just give you an outlook of Global Talent Visa GTI. Okay, many of you might have read about this. Okay, but what is so interesting is that the quotas have been tripled from 5,000 to 15,000. So the GTI is basically designed to attract highly skilled individuals. All right, and usually the requirement for this is you would need to have a recent master's degree or PhD. And the applicant should be in a position where that person is able to attract a very high income threshold of 153,600. That's the estimation in Australia. So if any of you here hold a recent master's or PhD and you are actually in this main target sectors, okay, the 7 target sectors are agricultural and technology, space and advanced manufacturing, financial technology, energy and mining technology, medtech, cybersecurity. I know that here we have many, we ourselves have seen many clients who are actually specializing on cybersecurity and ICT. So if any of you belong to this category, please get in touch with us and we'll see how to assist you through an alternative pathway, which is the Global Talent Visa. So that was the outlook on the migration and what was the hot news that was happening for the past 2-3 weeks. Now I'm just going to walk through the general skill migration. I'm sure many of you would be familiar with the skill migration requirements. So most importantly, the main criteria is you need to be below 45 years old. You need to meet a point test of minimum 65 points. And you need to have an occupation on the Australian skill occupation list, all right? So it's important to see what is your skill and match it to the list. And most importantly, you need to be invited to submit a visa. So these are the different kind of visa classes available in skill migration. Is these 3 main categories of visa application. The subclass 189 provides you with a direct PR, and this is only for occupations on the long-term list. This visa requires a very, very high point, which is at least about 90 points for most occupations, all right? And it's getting tougher by the day. For subclass 190, this is also a direct PR pathway, whereby you need to go through a state nomination. Your occupation can be on the long-term list or the short-term list. It also generally requires very high points, but on top of that, what I'm generally seeing is the priority of nominations are being given to those who are already living in the states, in the respective states in Australia. So having said that, 189 and 190 sounds like a more tougher route. What is a more practical route would be the subclass 491. This is actually a TR visa that has a pathway to convert into a permanent residency, either through a family sponsorship or a state nomination. You will be able to apply if your occupation falls into long-term, short-term, or regional. And most importantly, it's a little bit more offshore friendly, all right? I do see that for the past recent years and all that, my clients will be going through a visa like this. So today's focus, I would be actually explaining you through the pathway of 491. These are the steps involved from the start till you get a 491 visa approved till a PR. So the first step is always to get a skills assessment done. One of the basic requirements we spoke about is you need to have an occupation on the migration list. So how do you determine you have an occupation on the migration list? Is by doing a skills assessment, all right? Skills assessment with different bodies. So this will take time. There's a lot of documentations that is required in order to even do a submission for a skills assessment. So we need to plan the time wisely. While you do your skills assessment, your English test also needs to be done. Once you have completed the skills assessment in English, you will then move on to the EOI invitation. So when you submit your EOI, this is where it really matters a lot. How are you going to obtain your invitation? Is it through a family sponsorship or is it through a state nomination? Well, generally, I could say that 80% or even 90% of the cases will need to go through a state nomination these days. So we should allow time in the EOI selection process. Once you are invited, that's when you submit a visa, and the 491 is actually given a priority processing order. So the expected time frame is about 6 months. Once your visa is approved, if you look at stage 4, right, your 5 years visa would start. So once your 5 years visa starts, what you will need to do is you will need to fulfill 2 conditions. And when you fulfill these 2 conditions, you'll be able to convert it into a permanent resident visa. So what is this 2 condition? First, you will need to be living in a regional area in Australia for 3 years, and you will also need to be working in a regional area in Australia for 3 years. These are the 2 requirements that is needed. So what are the regional areas? Is basically anywhere in Australia except Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne. So these are the 3 cities that are off limits just during your the period where you're holding the subclass 491. Once you have complied with the condition of the living and the working for 3 years, you will be able to get a permanent residency, which is subclass 191, and you would no longer have any any geographical restrictions. Okay, so as much as everybody favors to have a direct PR pathway, I think we need to be very objective is to go through a pathway that is practical, at the same time a pathway that will definitely still yield you a PR. Okay, so this is the Subclass 491. Now let's talk about this alternative routes, all right? As since the migration scene can be competitive, many comes to ask us about, hey, does it really help if I actually go and study in Australia? Does it make it easier? All right, let me just explain about the study visa, all right, the study pathway to get a PR. First of all, it is a longer route, especially if you're already eligible right now. Let's say you already meet the point and everything, and it looks possible, you should try and attempt the skill migration first. Otherwise, you can also consider studying. It's a longer route because you need to go through a student visa first. And after your student visa, that it has to be for at least 2 years, then you convert to a temporary graduate visa. And after that, you will still need to apply for another visa, which is usually going to be either a skill migration or or an employer sponsorship. Okay, so as mentioned, you need to be studying for 2 years in Australia. And take note that because you're not a PR yet, you will be paying international fees. But one of the benefits of studying in Australia is it's going to be more practical if you choose to do this in regional areas, okay? The reason being is with the current priority being given to onshore applicant, certain states, which are the smaller states, they have special privileges given to their graduates. For example, South Australia, Tasmania, even Northern Territory for the matter. These states actually have different policies when it comes to someone who has actually studied in that state, who's graduated, and of course, currently working there. So let's say you've done your program like a master's for 2 years, and then you study in South Australia, you will be able to get a state nomination much easier compared to an offshore applicant. So let's see the route. So the student visa. So first you'll be entering Australia through a student visa, subclass 500. You will need to do a 2-year study, which is usually defined as 92 weeks. Depending on the type of study that you do, you will also get a different kind of graduate visa. So if you're actually doing a master's program, a bachelor or a PhD level, you will be getting a graduate visa, which is called a post-study work stream for either 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. If you are undertaking a diploma level or a trade certificate, take note your occupation must be on the long-term list, okay? Only when it's in the long-term list, you will be able to then obtain a graduate visa, which is a graduate work stream. This is only valid for 18 months, okay? So both of these visas both of this type fall into temporary graduate visa for subclass 485. So what happens after the subclass 485? That will be the question, right? Because it looks like you're going on a student visa, then you get a 485. What happens after the 485? Let's say you have a 485 for 2 years or 3 years. What happens after that? Take note that 485 does not have a direct transition into PR. So which means during the 485, you need to still come back to see how, not come back, what I mean is still go back to applying an alternative visa like general skill migration or an employer-sponsored visa if there's an employer who's willing to sponsor you in Australia. So what is the benefit of doing this is because you're already in Australia, ideally you would have gotten higher points because you've studied in Australia. Or as I mentioned, if you're on a graduate visa working in a regional area, then through that we can apply a 190 or a 491 for you. So this is the 3-stage pathway to get a PR through a study visa. It is a longer route. I'm happy to share more details with you if you wish through a detailed consultation. So these are the just average costs for the study option. As you can see through the study option, some attractive part is you can still work full-time, and your partner can also work full-time if you do a master's degree by research or a PhD. All right. Otherwise, you can generally on a student visa work 20 hours per week. So I would just like to sum up my quick overview on both the skill migration and the study pathway. So the skill migration, as much as you think I know many of you are reading a lot of forums, hearing a lot of buzz, and it looks like skill migration is dead. But trust me, skill migration will always continue to be needed in Australia. Long term, it's going to be a continuous process for Australia to have skilled migrants coming into the country. So do not judge the current priority arrangement as a permanent showstopper for your Australian dream. All right, everybody know this is just a temporary situation that we are all going through. So it is really, really important. We recommend that you stay ahead of the process to be readily prepared with all the prerequisites, right? So as much as you're worried about the invitations and the quota, do take note that that's only at the EOI stage, which is actually your second stage. You would first need to be ready with all your first stage documents, such as your skills assessment and your English. And I've been doing this for many years, and I can tell you to at least get your first stage of documents completed properly, it could take at least about 4 to 5 months, including document gathering time, including processing time by the Skills Assessment Authority. So my advice is not to delay, right? Because time is of essence in migration. Not to delay, get your stuffs prepared to be at least in time to see what happens this year or what happens in July 2021. All right. So look beyond the current constraints and plan wisely for your future. That's all from me. And I would like to pass on to Desmond for his New Zealand option. Thank you. Over to you, Desmond.
Audrey, great sharing. And hi, everyone. Good morning, and I wish all of you well. It's my turn to share with you the New Zealand residence visa options. And first of all, I would like to go through what are the possible pathway for one, to get a permanent residency in New Zealand. Now, there are generally 4 types, and I'm going to start off with the very first type, the business and investment migration. Now, under the business and investment migration pathway, we have something called entrepreneurial programs. This is for those if you plan to run a business in New Zealand. And that comes with an investment of a minimum 100,000, ranging from 100,000 to 500,000. Now, take notes. Under these programs, it comes with a strict set of rules and regulations. The success of your residency status is heavily relying on the success of your business. Because in the process of applying for this visa, we have to submit a comprehensive business plan. And within a 2 years period, you must fulfill each and every proposal that you have given to the New Zealand immigration. And under these programs, there's only certain business types that's acceptable. It doesn't have the flexibility like Australia. In New Zealand, you have to propose a business that's in line with technology, in line with high growth, and in line with exports. Yeah, so these are the 3 sectors. So if you're exploring running a business in New Zealand, do talk to me personally, and I would then advise you in detail. Look at your current business experience and see how it matches to the requirement of these programs. We also have the investor programs. There are 2 types. You can choose to invest 10 million New Zealand dollar, or you can choose to invest 2 million New Zealand dollars. Yeah, obviously in New Zealand, these programs has become so popular, especially during these pandemic periods and pre-pandemic periods. Reason because the programs, the investment allows you to invest directly into a completed property. So these 3 or 10 millions allow you to buy a property, a completed property, so long you're keeping it for rental or for investment purposes. Yeah. Unlike Australia, you can't invest directly into a completed property. Well, other than the property, you can also choose to go for bond, government bond, or the private managed fund. You can also choose to use the money towards running the business. So that gives you a brief idea on the business and investment programs. And we then talks about the second pathway for those who is being employed by a New Zealand employer with the basic salary for your occupation, and for this job offer, and you must be below 55 years old to be able to do so. Now, let's look at the third options. If you already have a spouse who is a New Zealand PR or citizen, or your children who are already, a PR or citizens, you could then explore this family sponsorship or family stream. And last, we are looking at the skill migration category, which I'm going to be talking, in more detail today. So these programs is designed, for those who has the skill that's needed by the country, So there isn't a lot of the skill as compared to Australia, but in general, we are talking about the health-related, construction-related, engineers, IT professional. These are, the occupation that is that comes under the essential long-term skill shortage list. Now, these skill migration programs comes with a set of the point system. And as at now, if you're exploring this pathway, you would need to meet a minimum of 160 points. Although the minimum point is just 100, but anybody who doesn't meet 160 points, I would not suggest them to even explore these options, because the chances of them being invited if they are below 160 points is almost impossible. Now, this slide meant to give you an idea on what are the point allocation. You can see points is given to your age. Age is one of the factor. Those who is below 29 years old or below 30 years old would have a bigger chance of having the maximum point. I'm sorry, it's from 20 to 39. Yeah, so if you are below 40 years old, you will have the highest point. Then if you are 40 to 44, then you have the 20 points. Likewise, so these skill migration programs goes all the way until 55 years old. Again, it has the advantage as compared to Australia, because Australia capped at 45, whereas New Zealand capped at 55 years old. Okay. Now you are also given a point to the qualification, to your qualification. So it goes by level 4 to level 10. 4 to 6 generally is at the diploma level. 7 and 8 is at the bachelor degree level. 9 and 10 is at the master or PhD level. Yeah. Your spouse, if your spouse has a tertiary education, that also helps to contribute point. Yeah. Also the work experience. If you have acquired the work experience at the skill level, then you are given points as well. That starts from 2 years minimum and all the way to 10 years or beyond the 10 years. All right. Last, you will notice the point system was designed to give 50 points, and which is very important and very essential over here. 50 points is given to those who comes with a job offer from the New Zealand employer. If you receive a job and you are getting this extra 50 points, which is very important. Now, based upon these sets of factors, let's look at what is the profile, what is the profile that stands a high chance of meeting 160 points. If you are young, you are below, again, there's a correction there, I'm sorry. If you are below 39 years old, you have the highest point. If you have a master degree or PhD, you get 70 points, which make up to be 100 points. If your spouse has a master degree or PhD, and you're getting extra 20 points, yeah. And somebody who has been working, and have an experience of more than 10 years at a skill level will have a 50 point. If you fit into this profile, then chances of you getting, the 160 point is there. But let's say, you are past 40 years old and you and your spouse do not have a master degree or PhD. And how do you plan to get this 160 point? That leads us to the next slide on how do we plan for that. Now, obviously, the strategy here is to see how do you gain this 50 point? How do you put yourself in a position to be able to gain this 50 point? Now, that options come with a study in New Zealand. In New Zealand, you only need to study up to a minimum of 30 weeks. Yeah, with this study of this 30 week, 30 weeks study in New Zealand, you are then entitled to a post-study work visa. And that post-study work visa, will be issued to you ranging between 1 to 3 years, depending on what you studied. Yeah. With this post-study work visa, that gives you an options or an opportunity to be employed, in New Zealand. As many of you might have tried applying for a job, and I am sure most of you got a response asking you if you have a work right visa, right? So this post-study, after 30 weeks of study, which then open you to an options of post-study work visa, which then leads you to land up with a job in New Zealand with that, that 50 points comes through. Okay, now that post-study work visa generally allows you to work in any job. Now, but what is interesting about this post-study graduate work, what is interesting about this study in New Zealand is if you are studying at level 7 and above, meaning degree and above, then your partner at the same time is also entitled for a work visa. So while you are studying, your husband or your wife will be entitled to this work visa and started to work in New Zealand. Okay. Now, can you imagine when he or she started working in New Zealand, he and she would then entitled to that 50 point. With you studying in New Zealand, with your spouse getting a work visa and landed with a job, and your spouse would then be in a better position to become the principal applicants of the skill migration. Yeah, because of, again, based upon what we have just discussed earlier, that 50 point is so essential. Okay, now, but just take notes, if you are exploring this pathway, what really helps for your spouse to get a work visa, provided that you studied something at least at the bachelor degree level. Okay, so if you, for example, if you already have a degree and you are looking at a second degree, then with an exemption, that potentially, might takes you another 30 weeks or so, to complete the second degree. Yeah, so this is a very interesting pathway given, during the interim times for those who is in a hurry to explore options because of the age, because of the current age, which doesn't give them the privilege of, waiting too long. They might need to explore these options. Now, the New Zealand has become the world role model, especially during these pandemic periods. And the number of the application has gone up significantly. And migrants from United States, migrants from China, and all over the place are basically flopping to New Zealand, and they have put in a lot of the application. And New Zealand has gained, the real world reputation and the positive branding. New Zealand generally has a very friendly government. People are generally welcoming, and the migrants, and this has put New Zealand at the advantage. Now, just a general idea about these skill migration programs, like what we have just discussed, it is a point system based programs, which you will need to have 100 points minimum to be to get into the system. But remember, you need 160 points. So during the stage 2, the EOI selection, we are putting in a set of your information, and which then make up your point. And because it is so competitive, and the New Zealand government only chose those who has 160 points to move on with the visa application. So the selection is twice a month. When you get an invitation, that leads you to the visa application. And because of the demand, it takes more than 1 year for the processing. Okay, during the processing time, the New Zealand government will look into whether or not the applicants receive a job offer during the application process. If you receive a job offer, then it leads you to a residence visa directly. Yeah. If you do not have a job offer, then you are getting this job search visa. With this job search visa, you're required to be in New Zealand and secure a job for 3 months. Now, when we talk about securing a job for 3 months, it has to be comparable to the skill level. Let me give you an example. If you're an IT professional with an IT degree and work as a software engineer, for example, you could generally look for a job in any IT field that includes IT help desk job, and that is considered as meeting the 3 months skill employment in New Zealand. Once you have managed to work for 3 months in New Zealand, and that brings you to the residence visa. Now, when we talk about a residence visa in New Zealand, and I think this is worth highlighting because everybody is starting with a 2 years residence visa status. So in that 24 months time, if you manage to spend a minimum of 6 months each year in New Zealand, then you will be entitled to a permanent residence status. Now, when we talk about a permanent residence status, it is very different as compared to Australia. As most of you might be aware, in Australia, the permanent residence comes in a cycle of 5 years. So every 5 years, you are spending 2 years in Australia. Whereas in New Zealand, the moment you're getting the permanent residence visa status, that is really for lifetimes. So that says whether you're living in New Zealand or you're living outside the country, yeah, your permanent resident visa status stays with you throughout your life. Yeah, you can be back to your home country for 10 years and choose to go back to New Zealand, your PR status remains, right? Now, I wanted to share about this common mistake that people usually make when it comes to general skill migrations. First of all, the qualification not being recognized. Now, that especially if you're coming from countries like India, coming from countries like Philippines, because the countries have so many states and with so many different level of the university. So if you're getting someone who might be getting a bachelor degree awarded from a specific university, but that bachelor degree might not be assessed as comparable to the New Zealand bachelor degree level. So there's a process of us going through to confirm your qualification level before you move on, with the application in detail. So we need to make sure that, your qualification is being assessed and it is being confirmed at least 7 or 8 or 9 equivalents before we can move you through, the process. So this is one of the mistakes that people usually make, and they assume that their bachelor degree is also a bachelor degree level in New Zealand. Okay, next, work experience not comparable. You keep hearing me saying skill experience, yeah, and skill level, your work experience that is at the skill level. What does it really mean? For example, if you are an engineer and you don't have a bachelor degree in engineering, you might have a diploma, though you might be working at a professional level as an engineer, but your work experience in this case will not be considered. Yeah. So there are many criteria and the comprehensive sets of rules and regulations that we have to assess you to be able to confirm your eligibility. So these are the common mistakes. Of course, there are more common mistakes that people make, because often the times I've been approached or I've been contacted with people who is in the middle of the process, who came across the problems and seeking help. So I'm just trying to come up with this so-called the common mistake that I've seen over the years. Now, I think this is my brief sharing, and I hope that gives you some idea on the New Zealand's pathway, and also a great sharing from Audrey earlier on New Zealand. And I guess we have a short session for a question and answer. Yeah, now, and over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Desmond, for great presentation. I can see there is like a lot of questions, which is a good thing. So I will go for a few questions first. Firstly, there is one question about the New Zealand asking. So, Desmond, for you, can a spouse work in New Zealand while the other spouse is studying?
Sure, sure. Well, the spouse, yes, the spouse can work in New Zealand. What happened is if you choose to study, uh, you choose to go to New Zealand and study at a bachelor degree and above, then your spouse would be entitled to a work visa. Okay. Now, what is really interesting about about that is your spouse don't have the restrictions on the number of number of hours, working hours. Your spouse generally can work, in any field. But what is really important is with your spouse working in New Zealand, if you still recall the point system, 50 points is given, to those who has a job offer in New Zealand. Your spouse would then gain that 50 points. And potentially your spouse with the 50 points, your spouse can easily meet the 160 point that is needed. So with you going to study in New Zealand, and then that is actually, what is really a big bonus is, your spouse being able to work and gain that 50 points. Okay. In addition to that, as a bonus point, your child will be able to enjoy your child will be considered as a domestic student and enjoying the local education benefits. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. So the next question uh, is there a subsidize on the children education while the parents are studying?
Yeah, sorry, before this question, so I just answered that on the first question.
Okay.
Yes, child, yeah, will be able to enjoy and pay a domestic student's fee. And
Okay.
this is not by virtue of the father or the mother who is studying there, but it's by virtue of the father or the mother who has a work visa. And when you are holding the work visa, your child is considered as a domestic student.
Okay, perfect. There is another one. I'm going for New Zealand first, actually. So there is another one. It says, I'm interested with the investment program, Desmond.
Hmm.
Uh, what can I choose to invest?
Yeah, there are a sets of in the investment options you can choose. You can choose the bond, you could choose private managed fund, you could choose to run a business, you could choose to buy a completed property. Yeah. And yeah, so there are a lot more options. So among all these options available, other than the bond, the rest of the investment options is considered as high growth. Okay. If you were to invest a minimum of 750,000 into the high growth, say, you choose to buy a property that worth 500,000. Yeah. And then you choose to invest private managed fund for 250,000. With a minimum of 750,000 investment, that entitle you to receive a 500,000 discount. So instead of you investing 3 million, you are required to invest only 2.5 million. Yeah, I hope that gives you a good idea. Please contact us and then, we will advise you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
sure. There is another one regarding for the skill, which another there is two questions, but one of them, I mean, both of them are similar. So it would be if I do not meet 160 points, can I still submit my application? That's the question that I see few people asking.
Yes, not advisable. As I said earlier, I have not seen New Zealand immigration inviting anybody who is below 160 points for a long time. If you are still exploring New Zealand and you know that this New Zealand is a great migration destination for you and your family members, I would encourage you to consider, going through the study pathway. And again, the study pathway would require you to study with a minimum of 30 weeks, a minimum of 30 weeks. So that could be quite fast. Yeah, after 30 weeks of study, that kind of like put you in a great position to, meet the skill migrations programs. Thank you.
Okay. So
Any
far for
questions?
New Zealand, this is the one. I mean, we have more, but let's go to Australia first. Then, if we have time, we go back to New Zealand together.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, sure.
thank you so much, Desmond, for now. Audrey, the first question is, do I have a chance if my occupation doesn't fall into the PMSOL?
Okay, so PMSOL is basically a guidance of how the priority is going to be for this year. So being priority doesn't mean the other occupations are totally not going to be looked at. So if someone actually has an occupation which is not on the PMSOL, it is definitely still worth putting in the application. But my advice would be the fact that it is not on the priority scale, we definitely have to go very, very strong. Okay, like I think this is a little bit more subjective. I really need to see what is this person's occupation, then I would be able to advise better. But yes, the answer is yes. Even if you're not on the PMSOL, you should still go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Okay, next one is, when can we know our chances if we should pursue the application or not? This is a question actually I'm receiving many people asking. So they want to know the chances, even the situation and everything. Maybe you just give the idea.
Okay, so chances would really depend on invitation, and basis of invitation comes back to state nominations. So like I mentioned earlier, right? So we really need to see what is the direction of each state's program. All right, but what's important for the applicant to do on their side is when the migration program starts, the applicant needs to be also ready with the relevant documents, such as the English that is required, the skills assessment. Both of these documents must be there. And then we will monitor to see which are the states that are suitable for their occupation and put in the application. So as long as, for example, so different states have got different policies, right? So some states prefer high points. So if this applicant is actually having high point, then the person has higher chances. So it all depends on how does each state is giving preference to nominating each applicant.
Perfect.
So we
Okay.
will get more news once the states are starting to open.
Okay, that's great. The other one is what is the main benefit between direct PR and 491 as a TR?
Okay. So permanent residence, basically as a PR, you would have the exact same benefits as a citizen. Okay, so let's go from there. The only thing that you cannot do would be, as compared to a citizen, is voting or working in the government. Now, between PR and TR, so there's a good part about the subclass 491, because 491 as a TR, generally you don't get free primary and secondary school. But 491, there are two things that are very, very essential. Is you still get free primary and secondary school for the children
Audrey,
care being given. All
Audrey,
right.
your line was broken. Maybe you want to
Oh,
repeat again. Yes, we couldn't
okay.
hear
So
properly. Sorry.
for the temporary residents under 491, there are two important PR benefits that's being given even during the temporary residence period, which is free education for primary and secondary school, all right, and Medicare. Medicare is also given to a 491 holder despite you being a temporary resident. These two benefits are already being given to you. And just to let you know, before this entire COVID pandemic started, there was already talks in Parliament that was going on, that it's actually at the final level where they're proposing for Subclass 491 to have the exact same benefits as a PR. So that's still in progress.
Okay.
All right.
Um, Okay, perfect. There are many more questions. So do you want to go for the last one? Then the rest, I think we will catch up with all of you after the webinar. If you do not have the full name, please write down your full name for us, and then we will come back to you, or contact detail, because some of you registered with a different name, so we cannot get the detail to come back to you. Please write down your name and then we come back again. But there is the last question I'm going to ask is documentation needed to apply PR is the same both for Australia and New Zealand for a skill pathway?
Okay. Audrey, would you like to answer this? Oh no, let me answer
Yeah,
because
you need to answer because you know Australia and New Zealand.
okay, sure. Now, in general, yes, generally yes, but Australia has skill assessment, whereas New Zealand doesn't have the skill assessment. What New Zealand has is a qualification assessment. So, but yes, in general, we need your qualification, full sets of qualification records. We need the work experience records, which we often the time prepare to make sure that the contents is being spelled out in what this authority needed, the way how this authority needed. So we will draft all this content for you to get it signed, and then we need all sort of the whole range of the personal records. Yeah, pretty much I would say, like 90% are pretty much similar. Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's great. For now, I'm seeing a lot of questions coming yet, but I think we'll catch up with all of you again on the WhatsApp or email. We will upload our this webinar on the YouTube. You can go to our channel again over there, subscribe, and then see all the webinar previously, and the webinar will happen in future, and also this current webinar. So for now, thank you so much, Audrey. Thank you so much, Desmond, for informative session. And nice to have both of you here. And thank you for all of you spending time with us. Have a good day all.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Have
Thank
a
you.
good
Take
weekend.
care. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.